Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Rangers Rabble Fantasy Premier League pod. The first pod that we're bringing to all of our subscribers on YouTube. So who better to have on for the first pod than Rabble Royalty Stew? Stew, how are you doing?
I don't know about Rabble Royalty, mate, but yeah, no, really happy to be here. Obviously, this is going up just after a bad night at the office for Rangers, so it's good to sort of take your mind off it with other things.
Precisely, yeah. I thought it might be a good opportunity to talk about anything other than Rangers for a lunchtime, and for anybody that's tuning in later on, a good opportunity to consume something that can take your mind off that absolute calamity of last night. So, Stu, this is your first time on. The general format, we've had a little bit of a chat about FPL in sort of general terms. Then we'll have a look at the week that was our game week 3 teams and performance. Little look at the Rabble mini league, and then a look ahead to game week 4. So I always start with the same question. Really, we've had different guests on each week, and it's really just to get a bit of a feel for sort of how long have you been playing FPL or fantasy sports in general. We'd heard from James has been on a couple of times. This is his first year of registering a team in FPL, so it's all kind of new to him, and I'm quite interested to get a feel for sort of the different relationships that people have with fantasy sports and how that transcends into sort of gameplay in general. Care, who was on a couple of weeks ago, he's much more into the draft format with the American sports, and it's interesting to see how that sort of plays out in his FPL play. So he maybe kind of doesn't make as many transfers as I would expect, because he's more used to sort of selecting that team. And I think in the draft format, you've sort of got less flexibility potentially, because you're relying on somebody to accept a transaction rather than just going onto the site and you're making any transfers you can for any of the players on the game. So yeah, just to start, yeah, what's your kind of how have you been playing for quite a few years? Could you keep engaged? What sort of stuff are you into?
Yeah, so I've played for at least 5 or 6 years, probably a little bit longer, but I always used to find it very hard because I would put a team together, I'd do it for 2 or 3 weeks, and then I'd just forget about it, and that'd be my team for the rest of the time. I'd maybe check back in once and see about 6 red players because they've been injured or transferred out or whatever, and never touched it again. But yeah, no, the last few years I sort of stepped back up, got into it a bit more. There's like a family league that I have, so obviously you want to win that, so you want to like prove you're better than everyone. So that sort of kept my interest. I do struggle still sometimes when it's like if it's like a Friday night game or something like that, and I forget, and then it's like, and I'll always do it. It'd be like it's like 6:30 usually, isn't it? Something like that, of the Friday deadline, and I'll be like 20 to 7. I'll be like, oh, my team, and I'll look, it's too late. It's too late.
Yeah.
So I tend to now. It's probably not good practice in terms of tactically being a good player, but I now tend to make my transfer almost straight after the game week, just so I can just not forget ever again. But it does come back to bite you sometimes, because I know like the proper keen guys that and based on what you, Rich, but analyze every aspect of it. I imagine you probably wait to the last possible moment to give yourself the best chance of having the best players. So I need to do it. I know I'm so forgetful that I'll just completely forget the deadline. So that was the way it works best. But yeah, probably 5-6 years, I'd say, overall playing.
Yeah, because it's an interesting point that you raised, because I think as the game's grown in popularity, like we were talking a couple of weeks ago about, this kind of, I think there'll be sort of circa 11.5 million players this year. Now, there are some users that have multiple teams, and there's dead teams and all of this kind of stuff, and other formats, but it's a huge rise in popularity. And you see now, even on Sky Sports News, the ticker's got like FPL information on. It's got like the highest point scoring strikers and all this kind of thing. And it's something that I wouldn't have imagined seeing quite a few years ago. But there are sort of a variety of different ways to play. I'm at the sort of more extreme end, where I'd probably call it sort of a genuine hobby, really, in the sense that or a pastime. So it's the kind of amount of time that you would dedicate to any other pastime that you're particularly interested in. I probably do with FPL, but yeah, it's good to get that perspective anyway. And I think within the league, there's quite a few. There's some people that I can tell from the moves that certain players are making that they are experienced players. If you know what I mean, it's almost like that kind of way of you can see how moves are being thought out. And then there's people like James and others who are having a crack for the first time. But you can put all of the sort of preparation into it that you like, but ultimately you're not only trying to predict a set of scores or outcomes, you're also trying to predict the individual players that will affect
Yeah,
those
that's it.
outcomes.
Yeah.
So it's just like it's really difficult, but you can definitely give yourself the best chance. So that was great to hear, Stu. So we'll move on to having a look at our teams from last week. So I'm going to shift format here. And we have your side as you lined up for game week 3. So if you want to just kind of, what we normally do, we'll sort of just touch upon a few players that have done particularly well, a few players that you're disappointed in, sort of any thinking going into the game week about sort of why you've picked the players or the formation.
Yeah, one thing should be a common theme of my teams is my keeper on the bench will 9 times out of 10 score more points than the keeper I play in the first team. I don't know why this happens. I could put a youth keeper on the bench and he'll somehow play and save a penalty, and he'll just get more than the keeper I play every time. So yeah, Edison. I always tend to go with Edison, or when Liverpool were really good, Alisson, when Newcastle sort of rock solid Pope, because I feel like you're not spending. They're expensive for goalkeepers, but you're not spending a massive amount of your budget on them, and they should be getting you a lot of clean sheets. Obviously, Edison aside this week, so I tend to try and get a real solid goalie. Back through. I mean, this week it's tough because I've done the thing I don't like doing, where I've put myself in a corner of trying to fit a certain amount of players in that I wanted, and that's affected my overall team. So like, if you look at the bench, at least 2 of the players on there I don't really want, but I'm having to do it price wise. That will probably change in the next couple of weeks because I've not been that happy with a couple of the players. So yeah, I was almost forced into the 3-4-3. Wan-Bissaka was purely because I actually thought he would start most of the games this season, which obviously he has so far. He doesn't give you great attacking output, but I thought he might get a couple of clean sheets. But obviously, they had a mare. He had a mare, so it's got me a big fat 0. Dina, I put in after watching him basically just set up every cross for the demolition of Hibs. And I didn't realise how much he gets forward, if I'm honest. I've watched a bit of Aston Villa, but I mainly sort of watch them for sort of, the midfield to the front. Never really appreciated how much he gets forward and how good his crossing is. So I thought I'd get him in there. I always butcher this guy's name. Is it Estepinen?
Estepinen, yeah, that's right.
There you go. So he's got a bit of a namesake in the Championship Hull as well, the Oscar, the striker. And I play a different sort of fantasy game, which obviously you're in this year. And I put him.
We won't mention that.
Yeah, it's been a bad start for both of us. But I put him in as my striker last season, so there's definitely something in that name because he did well for me last season. He's obviously free scoring fullback. He reminds me a bit of Tav in that he's almost a free roll, isn't he? He's always so far forward. But again, Brighton had a bit of a mare this week, so I'll be sticking with him for the foreseeable future because I think he's a big point scorer. But I'm a bit concerned about Brighton's ability to concede every single attack that goes against them. Bruno and Rashford as well. We literally had this conversation about them too, that we've both got them and they hadn't done anything for us, but we didn't want to take them out. And it would be typical of me usually to take them out and they score points, but luckily we kept them in this week, so they were the main guys who got me points. And same across the board here, like Matoma, again, another big point scorer, but he's obviously had a bad day at the office, which is where you pigeonhole yourself a little bit by going for the same team. Because if the team have a bad day at the office, then 2 or 3 of your players are not scoring big points. Saka, I feel like Saka's been off the boil, but he's a penalty taker. So I love a good penalty taker in my team because it's especially in midfield, and I like those players who play further forward but count as midfielders on FPL, which I used to have. Like, I don't know if he still does. I haven't checked. But Salah's usually a midfielder on there, and obviously midfielders score more points for scoring goals. And then up top, Haaland, like moved heaven and earth to get Haaland in this team. So it was typical. I did the bet boost on Bet365 at the weekend, which was Haaland to score at evens. So I've got him captain and I've got him to score. And I was at a festival at the weekend, and my mates next to me going, "Oh, you see Man City?" I said, "No, what's happening?" He said, "Haaland's missed a penalty." And I was like, "For fuck's sake, how typical." So it's obviously he won me my bet in the end, and he got me a couple of points, but that penalty miss was horrendous for his overall point scoring, because if that goes in, he's obviously going to have a really good week. We Visa, we call him. He's I've been impressed with him every time I watch him. He's had one really good week, so he's one I've sort of got my eye on a bit at the moment that might have to drop out. And Callum Wilson, man, he's like, I thought he would start a bit more because he finished strongly, and it looks to be his injuries problems aren't as bad, it seems, at the moment, but he just keeps coming off the bench. So again, he's a bit of surgery. It's probably going to have to be up front Wilson that drops out. But like in the other league we play, the big problem this year is the strikers. Teams aren't signing strikers, so it's very hard to get good strikers apart from Haaland and people like that. Even like Darwin, you can't really gamble on because he's on the bench. Gakpo plays pretty much midfield for him now, so it's very hard to get goal scorers in your front line in FPL. But yeah, that's pretty much the team in a nutshell, and why each player was picked.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So you've got there's quite a nice distribution of funds across all of the positions. Although, yeah, so I like the progressive wing backs that you mentioned, and they're an absolute dynamite in this format. I think we were talking last week. A lot of people, if they haven't played the game before, will look for potential clean sheets.
Yeah,
but it's really these sort of progressive wing backs. I mean, it's like, if Tav was in the game, like his ownership would be, I'd say, like 65, 70%, really. But with his penalty output and other assists, we've got a similar midfield. We did have the conversation about Fernandes and Rashford, and it's interesting because you can get into this sort of format of like constantly reacting to individual game weeks, but then I always feel it sometimes feels as if you're a week behind. You're sort of constantly responding to things rather than getting onto players just before they hit form, which is of course what you're desperate to do. But we both did well from Rashford and Fernandes. I've got Esther. Well, I'll put my team up shortly, but I've got Estepinen and Matoma as well. And it was a bad day at the office for Brighton. And I wonder now how many teams will, attempt this kind of low block, frustrate them, and hit them on the counter. Because I mentioned it on the EPL show, Luton in particular, like really, I felt just completely played into their hands. And Wolves as well, to a certain extent, just leaving themselves so open for the sort of quick counter attack. I bet you had some relief from Saka, who looked like he may have been off penalties after Odegaard took the pen against Palace, only to be back on them. But we did say yesterday that there was definitely a conversation that was had between them. I don't know if it was Odegaard asking if he could take it again, but Arteta seemed to indicate after the game that he doesn't stipulate who's on penalties. He just leaves it down to the players, which I found quite strange at that level. But if it works. And I think you've been quite unlucky in some areas here. I mean, Haaland's kind of becomes a little bit of a non-event because the majority of the active players own him and captain him. So whether he does nothing or he sets the game alight, it doesn't really matter. But some of your differential picks will have a huge impact, like Digne in particular, because Dina and Matty Cash on the other side, they get very far forward. And we saw last week on Sunday, Matty Cash with those 2 first half goals. I mean, that's absolute dynamite, isn't it, as a defensive FPL asset? The only thing that I'm sort of thinking here, Ndombele is going to become a problem, I think, because he's absolutely nowhere near that team as
Yeah.
far as I can see. And that must be, I mean, for such a high profile signing, that's at least 3 managers now that have just had a look at him and thought, absolutely no chance.
Yeah, it's not good. I also thought Cabot. I mean, listen, I know he's a defender at Luton, and they're not going to have the best time in defence, but I don't know. I think I've read an article on him being really really good, and they were a bit surprised that Luton managed to sort of steal that one, getting him in on loan. So I backed him all the way, but I haven't seen any profit from him yet. But we'll see as that goes on. But yeah, like you say, Ndombele he's got to go. One thing I do in fantasy, which I don't know if this is frowned upon, but I do it quite often, is I take 4-point hits to get players out of the team, like because I've got people in my other league that are always baffled when I do it, but I'm like I'm more confident the other guy is going to get me those 4 points back, so I might as well get him in now. Obviously, it backfires sometimes, but um, yeah, I'm also prone to an early wild card, just so you know. So this could look completely different next week.
So, yeah, and it's not. I don't think it's frowned upon. It's just a different playing style. Like I've seen sort of -8s, -12s pay off in certain game weeks, particularly if you've got double game weeks with midweek fixtures as well. I'm very conservative in my play, so I don't tend to take very many hits unless there's like a really obvious double game week. And I think Kabore, Luton, actually, they've had a horrendous start. Obviously, they didn't play game week 2. Horrendous start fixture wise as well as results, but they come onto a really good run after West Ham. So I think that he's somebody that you may be able to utilize from the bench. And Gabriel, I don't think anybody could have foreseen that he just wouldn't play at all. I mean, he was a mainstay of the side last season. Timbers is obviously out long term, but it seems like Tomiyasu and I can't think who came in at the weekend. Gregors, maybe. Yeah, either way, he seems like third or fourth. I wouldn't be surprised if he's actually punted in the next couple of days because he looks to be miles off the starting lineup. Right. I will fire up I'll just quickly go through my side.
Yeah, they keep playing. Wow, it's like 2 games now. They chuck bloody Thomas Partey in at fullback.
Yeah. No, it's no good at all. So I've got a Pickford Turner rotation at the moment, so I don't like to spend any more than 8.5 million across my 2 keepers. Like I'm a bit sort of anal about that, and that's just because I think if you can play the fixtures, you can get away with it with your keepers. Like I've had Edison in the past, but I've always found it really frustrating because whilst he will pick up clean sheet points, he'll never get save points because they just don't get troubled often enough. But it is it is a tightrope because he does end the season as one of the highest scoring goalkeepers most years. But I just think if you can get teams on a good fixture run, then you can get away with it a little bit. Now, it hasn't worked terribly well for me with Pickford, of course, because Everton haven't kept a clean sheet yet. I think we've come off the back of 3 2-pointers. Actually, it was a 0-pointer against Aston Villa, but I'd rotated him for Turner. So I brought Turner in while he was still at Arsenal. When the rumours were circulating about him going to Forest, and then I brought Turner in for the Sheffield United fixture to bring him out again. But that's going to become a problem for me because Everton, they don't look absolutely dreadful at the back, with the exception of the Villa game. But I'm not going to want those 2 long term. My midfield, my defence, again, is a slight problem area. I doubled up on Chelsea for the Luton game Friday night, and I got quite lucky with Gusto. I brought him in for Gabriel as my transfer for game week 3, and he returned with a clean sheet and 2 assists, which was 14-pointer from a player who's I think he was owned by about 12% of the game, so it was really a good one for me. Estepinen, yeah, same as you. It's disappointing. I wasn't expecting West Ham to do that to Brighton, but he's returned really handsomely in the other two games, and he'll just be a set and forget for me. Chilwell again with the clean sheet points, although he should have scored. I don't know if you've seen the highlights, but he was one on one with the keeper, and he just had to put the ball in the net, and somehow he tried
Mm.
to find a man. It was almost like somebody was controlling him, like on a PlayStation, and they just pressed the wrong button, and he just
Yeah.
spewed it out to the. It was just the most bizarre. I honestly don't like. He appeared to look up as well. Anyway, so that was my frustration, but maybe a little bit greedy because I did get the Gusto assists,
Mm.
and the first one for Sterling. He can't be. He didn't play much of a part in the goal. He
No.
just gave the ball to Sterling, who then
Yeah.
just took over.
I like the Chilwell pick though. He's I've watched him a couple of times this season, and he's one that's getting free reign under Poch.
Oh,
He keeps going through
absolutely.
one on one. I've never seen a fullback go through one on one so many times. It's absolutely crazy.
It's
But yeah, so that's one that I might have to keep in the locker. See if I'm remixing the team up a little bit.
his underlying data is crazy. Like the amount of shots he has in the opposition box is just
Mm.
unheard of for a wing back. So yeah, I'll keep him in. Gusto's going to become a problem when James is fit again, but he's 4 million, and we'll deal with that. I've one of my transfers for this week, which I'll mention at the end. Kind of partly deals with that. I've got the Fernandez Rashford double up. I've had that from the start of the season. I know loads of people were jumping off them after the Spurs game. But like you can't. I've been burnt before getting rid of decent players before
Mm.
like good home fixtures, and like I wouldn't have predicted a 3-2, but I'd have thought that they might have been in amongst the goals, and of course they were. And I wouldn't recommend. So then the patience is definitely the key. Even if you've got a decent side who are like slightly out of form. I think if you've got good fixtures, you go with it. But that's my sort of way of playing. People will disagree. Foden came on with a late cameo to get an assist. That was quite fortunate. Although I was quite unlucky that he was ill before the game and didn't start because I
Mm.
think after that performance at number 10 against Newcastle, um, I was expecting him to start and be very influential in that game. So it's one of those. Saka, like yourself, relieved that he's back on penalties and he won't be going anywhere. And Matoma. So our midfield is very
Yeah,
similar,
similar.
really, isn't it? I think, and I don't think there's a great deal to be done there. I'm going to deal with one of my Man United assets, but aside from that, I'm relatively happy. Watkins and Haaland up front, Haaland captain. Watkins was an interesting one because he's assisted in the first three games, hasn't scored yet, but he obviously netted the hat trick against Hibs. Um, yeah, 15 points from the first three games is good, but I am
Mm.
worried that he's now off penalties and he's not scoring in a team that are very free flowing and seem
Yeah.
to be scoring lots of goals. That's the thing that's concerning me the most. That they are. I mean, I don't know what their tally is over the three games. So they put four past Everton. They had three on Sunday. What was their opening fixture? I can't remember now. Maybe they scored
It,
twice. Anyway, it's a handsome tally, isn't it? And he
it
just
is.
doesn't.
It's. I find that the thing is as well. Like when I'm looking at I don't tend to look at a lot of shot data, but I just happened to be watching the. Yeah, I was going to say I thought they got battered the first game, didn't they? Newcastle tore them apart, and then
Of
they recovered.
course.
Yeah. But yeah, so Watkins is someone that not only I really like him, but he's obviously in my other fantasy team, which works a little bit different from this. So you need him to score. Like assist me nothing in that one. And yeah, like I said, I put him on because I thought he's at least taking penalties, right? And then they've just randomly taken him off penalties. But even yeah, I saw in the last match. I don't know how it ended, but halfway through I looked and he was sort of like fifth or sixth on the shot list. And you're thinking, how is five or six players like taking more shots than you in a game where you're the striker? So yeah,
Yeah.
he's becoming a bit of a concern in my other league. But I do really like Watkins, and I think he's a really good striker. So I think he'll probably come good for you in all. I mean, he's not even been bad, has he? 15 points.
No, no, and he's the sort. I mean, they've got Liverpool away at the weekend, and he's the sort that will pop up and score at Anfield, isn't he? You know, you couldn't put it past him. So I'm not too concerned about my forwards. João Pedro is my third forward, who yeah, I've had him on the bench for I played him actually last week, and I benched Matoma, which was horrendous, as Matoma ended up getting 12 points and Pedro had a single point again. I'm not sure he's kind of low down on my list of problems, but I'm not sure that De Zerbi is particularly happy with him fitting into the system just yet. He started the first game, then he was on the bench. He was on the bench again.
Yeah, he used Ferguson, didn't he?
Yeah, he's a very capable player. I remember him in Watford's season in the Prem a couple of years ago, and he struggled to get in that forward line as well. But whenever he comes on, he does look very lively. He's very young still, of course.
Yeah.
So I'll hang fire with him for the time being. In defence, I'm pretty weak to be honest, and I'll explain one of my changes shortly. I went for Rico Lewis when the news came through about John Stones being injured ahead of the opening game week. But then I don't know, anybody that's like makes late transfers will know that the system can get like super glitchy in the last sort of 15, 20 minutes. And that happened with me. So I was able to make the transfer, but then I couldn't bring him off my bench. So I didn't get the 6 points for the clean sheet on the opening day against Burnley. And then he hasn't been used since. So all in all, that goes down as a little bit of a calamitous transfer. And I don't normally do this kind of thing where I'll just jump on a player short term. So I'm a little bit frustrated, but he's spoiler alert, he's no longer in my team. And I've got Bayer from Burnley. Similar to your Kabore shout, I wanted a cheap defender that's likely to play. That, you know, if need be, if I've got loads of problems, just somebody that can come in and like, there will be fixtures that they have at home where you might think there's a clean sheet potential, although he's injured out till at least game week 5. So he'll just sit there for the time being. So I finished the week on 68 points, which was, a really good game week after a disappointing start. So it's just to looking for one more before we head off to the international break. So we'll have a quick look at the Rabble Mini League. We'll just do the top 10 and then the bottom. So yeah, FPL's coming home with a very solid 62 points, 202 overall, which I think
that's outrageous.
It's about 50k in the main game, which is huge. I mean, I know like the figures sound enormous, but like if you're talking about 11 million players, like you take 50k, don't you? You know, all day long. I'm up into third, so I'm pleased with that. Brian Fotheringham.
That's a great name for Brian. I've never seen that one before. That's a cracking name.
That's a classic, yeah. And he's had not this sort of fairly average game week, but a very good start. Stu, you're in 10th at the minute, mid-table.
Just make the top 10 cut off, don't I?
Yeah, I think that's solid enough. Look, very grouped in and around the sort of low 70s. So one good game week and you're into the top 5. I had to give Lee a shout out a couple of weeks ago as he was top of the league with Clap My Loftus Cheeks, which is always always a good one.
I've got to finish ahead of him. I'll be fuming if I don't.
This is these individual mini league battles. Quick mention for the bottom of the league. Our very own Scott Kerr.
Yeah.
Thrash Metal FC. No. 37 points and quite a few problems.
Oh, I can see one straight away in Casemiro.
Stones and Mount out. Yeah, there's
it looks like Kerr set up a team that would actually be a good team, but not a good point scoring team.
Yeah, that's kind of the nuance, isn't it, of knowing like what makes a good FPL asset versus just like who's a good footballer. Like your defensive mids, are almost useless, aren't they? Because they don't, like, you don't get there's a Sky version of the game that some people play where you get sort of rewarded for pass completion and this kind of thing and tackles. So they come into play there, but yeah, it's tough. But on paper, a very good team.
I think the Scottish one does something similar. I used to play that one. First year I thought was really good. Second year they changed all the style of it, like really unintuitive. You could have multiple teams, but if you entered your team in more than one league, you had to make transfers for both of the teams, even though it's the same team. And This year they said they were going back to the old format, which is almost a carbon copy of FPL, but I'd already lost interest by that point, so I didn't go back to it. But I thought they had a couple of good ideas. I liked that they had an idea where if a player comes off your bench, it doesn't come off in order. It comes off as the highest scoring bench player comes on.
Yeah.
So you automatically get rewarded for picking good bench players or a good team, a squad, as opposed to just your first 11. So they had some good ideas, but yeah, it was a bit rubbish after last season. So I didn't go back to it. Plus, everyone just has Tab, and that's Tab is the Haaland of the game, really.
Yeah, and I've heard actually that it's much improved again this
Mm.
year, and I was actually thinking that next season,
Yeah,
it might be something that we jump on and we do the Scott because I'd much in some ways I'd much prefer to be focusing on that particularly under the Rabble banner. It's just
mm.
that the game hasn't really had the support after the previous year, and also like we come into kind of and I think you're the same that we don't really have second teams.
Yeah,
Certainly, I've never heard you mention a second team, and I don't. So I don't have any sort of bias whatsoever. Whereas I think if I was playing the SPFL
yeah,
version,
that's true. Yeah,
it's going to get
it's very
difficult.
hard to get them in. Yeah, yeah, I know what you
It's and
mean.
I know that that sounds a little bit pathetic in some ways, but I just don't think I could do it. So
Yeah.
then I'm kind of limiting my sort of ability to succeed. So yeah, we'll see, we'll see. So yeah, that was the week that was. So before we close out, quick look ahead to game week 4. What we'll do here is just have a look at the sort of maybe a bit of a discussion around any transfers that we're considering and a look at the top transfers in so far this week. It's funny because this is where you really see like the idea of sort of people just jumping on form players. Like with
Yep.
Sterling, 2 goals against Luton, a good 45 minutes against West Ham. And that's all I could say about him for the last 2 years, I think.
Yeah.
But he's all the rage. 821,000 managers have already brought him in. What do you think about that?
Um, I think Sterling is going to get a bit more free reign under Poch. I think he's going to get a lot more out of him than we've like you said than we've seen in the past 2 years. But again, I don't like reacting to like you said performances against the cannon fodder of the league. No disrespect to Luton, but that's what I think they will be. That being said, my transfer has already been made, and it is one of these in the top transfers, and it was a very reactive transfer, and I'm already regretting it now. I've seen this.
Is this an exclusive you're giving us here?
I'll give you the exclusive. Yeah, it's the other Chelsea player on the list, Gusto. Only because I actually really like the look of him when I was watching him, and I fell into the trap of just a few people in my other league had him already, and I fell into that trap of I should get him as well because now my luck he'll do it again the following week. But one thing I said that we do a draft league as well, and one thing I said in that group chat that is really big in the FPL. My luck for transferring players out that will go on and have a stormer is pretty much sensational. So I can't even remember who I've transferred out. It must have been a defender. Who did I have? I can't remember who I've transferred out from now, but whoever it is will probably have a stormer. So I'd probably put him in your team if you can.
Yeah, and I thought I saw your face drop slightly when I was talking about James being back in light training. So that will, that explains it. And I've got one. I'm making 2 transfers this week. So
Ooh.
one of my transfers has already been made because my level of and looking into my transfers involves checking the FPL price changes website to jump on players before they go up or down in price. So I got rid of Rico Lewis, and I've got Foden and Haaland in there, and I've got no intention of moving them on. So I wanted some defensive Man City cover, and I've gone for Gvardiol
Mm.
at 5 million. I was looking at Ruben Diaz at 5.5. it's so hard to suggest that any Man City player is nailed on, isn't it? Particularly in
Yeah, that's the
defence.
problem. Yeah.
But I think he's as close to it. I mean, he didn't feature in the opening game, and he's just played back-to-back 90 minutes. So I'm similar to you with your keeper. I'm just looking to hoover up some of those 6-pointers, really. I know that he's not going to pose any attacking threat. And all things being equal, I would like John Stones. He would be sort of my sort of standout defensive pick, but he's obviously unavailable at the moment. So, yeah, I'm bringing Gvardiol in. The other decision, and this is 2 free transfers, by the way, because I rolled one the previous week. It was Fernandez or Rashford. I don't hate either of them, but I don't want them both anymore. I don't think
Yeah.
they're away at Arsenal, and I'll take those Nottingham Forest points and run. I think, and you can make arguments for both, but I think on balance, I want to keep Bruno just with the penalties and greater chance of assists. I know that Rashford will score more goals, and it's a tough one. Rashford's also 0.5 million more expensive. So I'm taking Rashford out and bringing in James Maddison. I really like what I've seen so far. He scored again last weekend, and they're going to Burnley at the weekend, who there look to be so much space for a number 10.
Yeah.
And I think he could really exploit that. So, yeah, Rashford out, Maddison in, and a little bit of money in the bank. That's my plan at the moment. I haven't made that transfer, so if I do hear of anything that spooks me, I won't do. But that's the current plan. Otherwise, yeah, it's pretty much like Udogie got double figures last week with an assist again. I don't think his place in the team is by any means cemented, because they've got so many options at wing back, and like the way that Postecoglou's been talking is that he's still sort of figuring out his best team. Quick one on transfers out. Gabriel, one of your maybe that was your transfer out. I don't. It could have been one of your defense.
No, Gabriel's still there.
Okay. Yeah, Rashford, who I'm looking at punting. Obviously, Shaw's got the injury. João Pedro. So yeah, that's the that's
Oh, it's
our kind of
Wan-Bissaka. Wan-Bissaka, I'll get rid of.
Wan-Bissaka. Understandable. Yeah. So we'll be hoping for some returns this weekend.
I like that. I've got 3 players, by the way, that are in the top transfers out.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's sometimes you see like players and it's like it looks to be absolutely ridiculous. Like you'll get somebody that you'll know to be carrying a light injury, or that we've seen something suggesting that they're not going to play, and people just jump on them. But I think most of them on these lists here are sort of fairly logical. I don't really like people jumping off Brighton so easily. I know it's a bad result, but like they're not. We saw what they did after the Everton defeat. They went and beat Arsenal. So I think there's a sort of potential to hold on to those assets for a little bit longer. Right. Well, I think the only thing that I've left to do now, after reviewing the game weeks and looking ahead to game week 4, is a small plug for our mini league that we've just been through, the Rangers Rabble mini league. Access code FAPRA9. Entrants are able to access the league until game week 8. So if you fancy yours, if you think we're talking nonsense and you fancy yourself as top FPL manager, please do get involved. And also any comments about your transfers that you're planning, benching dilemmas. I'd love to hear from you all, and I'll get back to all of them during the week. Stu, I really enjoyed that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, really enjoyed that, mate. Cheers for having me.
Yep, great to hear about your plans, and I hope that you're able to engage throughout the season this year with our content, and I look forward to catching up with you in a few weeks to see how you're getting on. Cheers, Stu. Cheers, everyone.
Still considering the wild card.
We'll have a chat about that off air. Cheers, everyone. Bye now.